Why, hi there, it's Uncle Ron, and welcome to a chat on this. Oh, my nose itches. Of course it does, as soon as I hit record. September 19th, 2024. And I want to talk today about, I guess, my evolution from digital to dice. No, not the podcast, although certainly that is one of the major reasons why. I've been a gamer for about, the better part of 40 years. Starting with, as you know, from other things that I've talked about over the years, Championship Baseball, the great game, released by Milton Bradley and the MLBPA and Topps, which was my first cards and dice experience back in 1983 with all the All Stars there. That was my introduction to it, and then eventually Micro League Baseball and Avalon Hills NBA and making their own football teams and yada yada yada. So everything except for the times where I actually owned Strat cards back in the early 90s when I was single and living at home and flunking out of college has been a digital experience for me. Now, I got back into the sports sim gaming community back around the turn of the century, 24 years ago, or right around there, right after around the time that I got married, by buying a Stratomatic CD. You remember a CD? It was in all the papers. They put music on them, like Nickelback and Britney Spears and other forgettable artists from the late 90s. Anyway, and of course, you had to have the key disc and all that. And so, going back to playing Stratomatic baseball because that's what I enjoyed most from my early days in college. And then that grew to buying Second and 10 on CD and OOTP and then and eventually Action PC. And so most of my gaming for the better part of 15 years or so, if it wasn't necessarily Strat or Second and 10, it certainly was more on the computer end of things. Although everything I play now either has a helper or an Excel spreadsheet or a ball roller, because but we'll get to that. And it was fine. It was nice to be able to play. I've played a lot of games. I remember playing a game called Jump Shot Basketball, which I think I spent way too much money at the time for. And you got to be able to create basketball teams. And I got into Action PC 17 years ago, I think it was. I think about the first version, right around one of those World Series runs. I forget. Dave Cook would know. And so that was primarily my thing, was doing it. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is the first version of OOTP, I think, in years that I haven't bought or wasn't gifted. And that's okay. So computer gaming certainly made me an independent gamer, and I could play what I want. And there was some spreadsheet type games. Front office football, I think, was another big one too that I played. Wasn't really a huge fan of, but I played it because I didn't know about sports replay gaming for football. But so the story goes, it just kind of goes from I did some console gaming, much more into the computer gaming for sports, as far as, like I said, front office football and 400 sports college basketball and this, that, and the other things. And then settled in on Action PC. I own all four, and I've owned all four or all five games for a long time. And as you know, the baseball game really does play quite well, and that is never going to leave the channel. I mean, we have made a cottage industry out of streaming Action PC baseball. But at some point along the line, that itch of starting to want to roll dice and get results and write the story in your head the way that you foresee it kind of took over. I think it started back, maybe 10, 15 years ago when I got a hold of an APA clone. It had 50 some odd seasons of freebies that came with it, and that was always fun. And it was all driven on Excel spreadsheets, so it rolled its dice, and you could do what you want. You clicked on the results. There was Above the Rim Basketball, again, a fast action card derivative of Status Pro, created by Wayne Ponywaz, and has been added to by lots of talented people in the community. One of probably the best free game out there, and it comes with every NBA season and a lot of NCAA seasons now, thanks to Scott Yost and all the wonderful work that he's done over the last few years to get teams out there. So the cards and dice part never went really away. I mean, it's all done on computers anyway, but me being able to slow down and create my own stuff and use my own imagination, that just never really went away. Then we started the podcast, and now, if you know Dave Gardner's story, he pretty much went from being a console player, NHL series and all that, and I believe it was he went to, okay, now in the tutorial in Madden, whatever year it was, left analog stick, right button, and the square to sneeze. And you can't advance until you do that. And I mean, these games get more and more physically complicated, which is why I really haven't bought a console since I had the PS1 back when I was engaged, which was a long, long time ago. In a galaxy far, far away. So, where was I going with that? So I understand where he's coming from that, and of course, those console games can be big money, not necessarily just to spend, but I mean, you can watch competitive Madden tournaments and all that. It's amazing what you can do. And some of those console type games I still enjoy. I have the NBA one, which I can kind of play, and the PGA Tour Golf, which I love beyond compare, and all that. I mean, that's not exclusively into cards and dice. But as we got further and further with the show and started to work on more and more games, and me buying more games or being told about more games, it was the card and dice ones that really stuck with me the most. You've heard me talk about Stratomatic Basketball. I'm not a huge basketball fan, but because of that and Above the Rim, it allows me to visualize basketball between my ears. And so I can see what's going on. There's no distractions from the floor or loud noises unless that fire alarm goes off. Boy, wouldn't that have been fun if that happened right now? Or anything else that's there. I'm not being forced into someone else's realm of how it works. Again, not a slam at all. At all the wonderful creators who do closed engine computer games. OOTP, Action PC. I'm sure I'm missing some others there. But that's just... to be able to create your own universes and write down your own results. And I think that to me, it really was just kind of, we produce a lot of content for you to watch, and a lot of this cards and dice stuff doesn't do well with creating content, or isn't always to play in things that you can necessarily see. And I think one of the great, I don't want to say injustices, because that's not necessarily true, but there's a lot of great games out there that don't necessarily look great on camera. And I know that Dave Gardner, Al Red Sox fan, ID Jester, among others, have done yeoman's work in trying to present those games in a fashion that you can follow and see and understand and feel like you're a part of. Fast forwarding to some games, and playing some All-Star Golf, ASG Golf, and other things that were a hybrid of games that let you roll dice or had dice rolls, and you either recorded or saw the shot, whether it was golf or tennis, or just setting things up on a spreadsheet and going to town on it, making sure that you got set up for A, B, and C. In the last couple of years, I've just become really, really, really drawn to games with not only open engines, but for me to be able to record the results manually. It makes me feel like it's part of the whole process. I just rediscovered Solitaire Pro Football. Again, a game I cannot show you because I've been asked not to. But it scratches that itch. And, I feel bad for the people in the community who have created tremendous computer games. They're like, oh yeah, I'll try it out. I'll show it out for you. And then it will sit for a while because it's not my first thing to pull off the shelf. And yes, there's a setup that goes with some of these cards and dice games, and auto racing and track and field, which are some of the latest things that I've bought, are very obscure and don't have a lot of fans to begin with for those sports. But again, it is using the game engine that is completely compatible with who you are, and that is the game engine between your left and right ear. And I think the magic for me in playing these games, regardless of what the sport is or how it is being able to visualize what it is you want between your ears. As kids, or those of us who were kids in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a series of books that they would always be at the elementary school book fairs called Choose Your Own Adventure. And it would be, some sort of mystery that was above the pay grade of the Scooby-Doo mysteries. And you would get to the proverbial fork in the road, and you would go, oh, do you go left? Turn to page 37. If you want to go right, turn to page 117. And that usually would be a bad thing, because that was towards the end of the book. And once in a while they throw you a bone and fooled you, go back to page 73. And it got you involved in reading and involved in the story, because you've got to go, as much as, kind of like Zelda or the role-playing games that would come later on the computer, the text adventure games, and then the RPGs that would come. You felt like in that story, whether you were chasing the ghost or finding the treasure, or maybe even in some case throwing for the touchdown, that you felt like you had a say in how things turned out. And I've wanted to write a book for a long time. I've written some, and I realize I don't usually have the energy to do that, because when I find that when either A, I'm streaming and we're going through the story of whatever it is I'm streaming, or when I'm playing a game offline, that I'm writing a story in my head. The game, at the most basic level, the dice don't know what's going on. The charts don't know what's going on. The computer that you're putting stuff into, the program, might know what's going on, but it really can't read anything beyond that. The only thing that makes it all work is the fact that you know what's going on. And in a manual experience of cards and dice, okay, let's talk baseball for a minute, or football for a second, because I've been playing a bunch of that. You could picture yourself at Gillette Stadium, or AT&T in Dallas, or the Rose Bowl, or your backyard, or your high school field, or whatever, wherever you want these people to come to life for you. It's only limited by your imagination. You're writing that story, and sometimes things can get crazy, and sometimes things can get to blowout status, and sometimes you're biting your fingernails all the way to the end. But it's a story that you create. And when you do a replay, or at least when I do a replay, it's a story that goes on and on and on, and you get kind of excited to see now, how does it end? And that's not necessarily just a cards and dice thing. I mean, with the Action PC, I'm quite excited to see how the 88 Red Sox do at the end of the year, or how the 88 Blue Jays do, because the Blue Jays haven't faded yet. But in a manual situation where you're doing all the work of rolling the dice and counter-checking the play, or entering a dice roll in as you can with some games, you become much more, for me, becoming more involved with what's going on in front of you makes me want to go even further, even if it's not something that I'm showing off here. And I think that's, for me, is the great joy of cards and dice. I'm writing the story. I'm reading the story as it goes along. I'm writing the story, and I don't have to put it through a grammar checker at the other end of it. And again, it's all mechanized for me to some degree, because there's either a ball roller or a dice roller or an Excel helper or a stat thing that this stuff goes into, but I'm the one that juggles it all and plays what I want. And the reward out of that makes it worthwhile, because it's something that I've created myself. And I think that's the bottom line is for me. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the fully computerized games. They do a good job in immersing you in something. I just don't think that you necessarily have the control in that you do with cards and dice. And for me, that's the biggest joy, knowing that I've done this. This is how we got there. It may not be the results I want, but it's the results that I have. And you're playing something, and you're learning something, and you can see it between your ears. I mean, people talk about, people lost on the screens and talk about books. Well, you open up something, you look at pieces of paper, and you hallucinate stuff. That's reading. That's exactly what reading is. And that really is what cards and dice is all about. You've opened the book, you've pulled out the cards, you've pulled open the charts, and you're reading, and you're creating, and you're being productive, and you're using your head. And so that's what the joy I find in my early 50s, and coming back full circle for doing this for 41 years now, of cards and dice. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.